said, just keep doing the next right thing. In that light, Quee's statement makes all the sense in the world. Even though we may not know exactly what Quee's method of autosuggestion, it is, in my opinion, incredibly brilliant in its simplicity. Having heard the phrase, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better, many people have sought to improve on it. However, if you have read his book, they would truly understand Quee's method and realize why it is important not to attempt to improve it by adding specifics. Even Jose Silva of the world-famous Silva method, in his attempt to personalize the phrase, only added an extra better to it. The subconscious mind, or our higher self if you prefer, knows what we need. There is no need, in fact, it is inadvisable to add specifics to our autosuggestion. The awesome power
Speech alike, the most natural sounding text-to-speech software on the market. Hey, I'm Joey, and I'm what?
I got into the habit of every now and then reading back into the pages of my prior week's entries. Soon it became very evident to me that many of the bad events I wrote about had triggered good things. In fact, many of the good things I wrote about could never have happened if the bad things hadn't occurred first. In no time at all, I became convinced that I didn't really know what was good for me or what was bad for me. What then should I meditate about or pray for? If I don't really know what's good for me, what then should my goals be? Someone much smarter than me advised, just ask for knowledge of what is best for you, and as that knowledge becomes apparent or available, try to act accordingly. Then they said, just keep doing the next right thing. In that light, Quee's statement makes all the sense in the world. Even though we may not know exactly what we need most, our subconscious or higher self knows. And we can use that knowledge by keeping the statement simple and trusting our subconscious for the results. Some hypnotists say that our subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between a real or an imagined experience. I don't even begin to buy that theory. I think our subconscious mind can operate in dimensions that we haven't yet been able to wrap our minds around. We don't know exactly how it works, but we have begun to know a little about how to use it. Some have even said that it doesn't respond to negative suggestions, then turn around and do regression to cause therapy to remove the effects of past negative impressions. Well then, what is your subconscious mind? Smart or dumb? I believe it's powerful and awesome, and a long time ago, Quee found a good way to use it. Read on, use it, and watch the results prove it. Chapter 1. The Reality of Autosuggestion. I wish to say how glad I was to come to personal during a particularly troubling period in my life, I kept a journal, faithfully entering my thoughts into it every night. I entered the bad occurrences as well as the good things. I got into the habit of every now and then reading back into the pages of my prior week's entries. Soon it became very evident to me that many of the bad events I wrote about had triggered good things. In fact, many of the good things I wrote about could never have happened if the bad things hadn't occurred first. In no time at all, I became convinced that I didn't really know what was good for me or what was bad for me. What then should I meditate about or pray for? If I don't really know what's good for me, what then should my goals be? Smarter than me advised, just ask for knowledge of what is best for you, and as that knowledge becomes apparent or available, try to act accordingly. Then they said, just keep doing the next right thing. In that light, Quee's statement makes all the sense in the world. Individual temperament. Imagine you were
a coach.
If you're looking for a CRM, get Monday.com's flexible CRM solution that can manage the
stuff that's available here, and everything that I talk about is really predicated on you're coming from a moral place. And
the show, perhaps, well, not perhaps, for sure. That's where I want to end up with this. But the topic of the show, how to talk anyone into anything, sounds quite crazy. And where I want to start with all this is, if you're skilled enough, is that possible? Is that sentence a feasible reality?
This always makes interactions better every single time. One caveat is, if you talk somebody into something that they really want to do, then they're not going to implement. So, but the amount of latitude that we have over what we do and we don't do depends so much on what we care about and how we perceive things, that there's a reason why these skills are so powerful, and a reason why Adam Grant recently wrote a piece called The Dark Side of Emotional Intelligence, because it's just so enormously powerful. So yeah, there's use your powers for good and not evil on it.
So is that the key to all of this then? We perhaps might have to jump straight to the end of the show, we'll fill in the middle. But if you've got all the skills, you can convince someone to do something. But in reality, are you convincing them to do it in the moment? But if they really don't want to do it, they're just going to fall back and never. Use the word implementing there.
Right. Well, if you try to trap people with yes, which is one of the most common things that they're done. I mean, that's really makes deals that don't last. We like to say yes is nothing without how.
And what do you mean by that, trapping people with yes? What's an example?
Would you like to make more money? Would you like to have more free time? Would you like to live in this vast mansion on the Hollywood Hills? It's kind of a trap of breadcrumbs, and it's such a habit. I actually had one of my students in the MBA course. He had a long-time client that he was notified that she was changing her accounts. He was an investment advisor, and she was scared to talk to him. She had her secretary call his secretary, and he thought he had a great relationship with her, and he called her on the phone, and she said, I just didn't want you to talk me into something again that I didn't want to do. And he didn't realize that he was using, quote, logic traps, which were littered with answers to yes. And it was so good at a depth. Are so powerful, and a reason why Adam Grant recently wrote a piece called The Dark Side of Emotional Intelligence, because it's just so enormously powerful. So yeah, there's use your powers for good and not evil on it.
So is that the key to all of this then? We perhaps might have to jump straight to the end of the show, we'll fill in the middle. But if you've got all the skills, you can convince someone to do something. But in reality, are you convincing them to do it in the moment? But if they really don't want to do it, they're just going to fall back and never end up, use the word implementing there.
Right, well, if you try to trap people with yes, which is one of the most common things that they're done. I mean, that's really makes deals that don't last. We like to say yes is nothing without how.
And what do you mean by that, trapping people with yes? What's an example?
Would you like to make more money? Would you like to have more free time? Would you like to live in this vast mansion on the Hollywood Hills? It's kind of a trap of breadcrumbs, and it's such a habit. I actually had one of my students in the MBA course. He had a long-time client that he was notified that she was changing her accounts. He was an investment advisor, and she was scared to talk to him. She had her secretary call his secretary. And he thought he had a great relationship with her, and he called her on the phone, and she said, I just didn't want you to talk me into something again that I didn't want to do. And he didn't realize that he was using, quote, logic traps, which were littered with answers to yes. And it was so good at a depth of talking her into things, with the yes trap, the mere agreement, the yes momentum, that he could always talk her into something on the phone. It would sound so logical. And she knew that there was something instinctively wrong with this, and finally she didn't even want to talk to him on the phone anymore at all. And that's what ends up happening. I mean, if you use yes to trick people into something in a moment, what happens is your deal falls through, and they stop wanting to talk to you, so you have to get out of it. Now, the flip side of it is, once you start dealing with people on an emotional level, and understanding, we use the phrase, know what their religion is. Because religion has been used throughout the centuries to talk people into ridiculous things. I mean, there's these monumental pyramids in India that would be construction feats today, and they were built 1,000 years ago. And they talk people into working their entire lives away for nothing, because it would save their soul. So if you know what somebody's religion is, and you can tap into that, when was the last time somebody talked hundreds of workers into working their entire life, basically for food only, and to be happy about it? So there's some crazy stuff that's available here, and everything that I talk about is really predicated on you're coming from a moral place. And you have a good sense of right and wrong. I've had conversations with some international banking friends of mine. A good friend of mine is head of an international bank, and I say, let me do this stuff because I can work magic with it. And he said, well, that's the problem. He says, you're driven by moral principles, and this kind of influence. If you're driven by moral principles, then it's okay. But if you're not, that's why sociopaths take advantage of people, because they use emotional intelligence to talk people into crazy things. Charles Manson. Some of this stuff, once you really understand how powerful it is, it's amazing what you get people to do.
And do we know all this innately? And what I mean by that is that the slimy, I'm using that word specifically, online marketers who become an entrepreneur, grow your business, do this, and this coincides with perhaps 10 years ago it was late night advertisements for this miracle thing that's going to give you abs. I don't know. That's just one example that comes to mind. Obviously that resonated with me. I wanted abs as a 16-year-old, even though that never happened. But those come across as slimy. And those adverts, as you were saying, hey, do you want to lose weight? Hey, do you want to have more free time? Hey, do you want to have more money? These all coincide with that. Is that an innate feeling that we all have when we're approached this way, that we feel that we're being manipulated and we feel slimy and gross because of it, even though perhaps it works in the moment?
Yeah, right. And because we've all been walked down that path so many times. And it happens in every culture. I mean, one of the advantages to my approach to negotiation, if I can say it, is as a hostage negotiator, we use human nature-based principles that have been shown to work in every culture on the planet. Hostage negotiators in Tokyo, Japan use the same skills that the ones in Newark, New Jersey use, the same skills the ones in Cape Town, South Africa use, the same skills in Manila in the Philippines, because these are human nature-based skills. So I know from having negotiated in every culture on the planet that this is a trap that everybody's had used on them over and over and over again. We feel slimy because we got tricked into this a couple of times already, and we were used as a result of it. And so now that's our instinctive reaction. We're like battered children with yes. I mean, across the planet, we all react the same way when somebody tries to trap us with yes. And when we get fooled by it, we're mad at ourselves. It's a friend of mine says, look for the people with flat forehead. And I said, what are you talking about? And he says, that's the guy that went like, oh my God. Yeah.
Okay, so we want to talk anyone into anything. What is the first step here? Is it finding the religion? And we'll go through perhaps the first step rather than the biggest bang for buck, and we can come on to that in a bit. But what's the first thing that we should be doing? Moral implications aside for the moment, what's the first step?
Well, the first step is, do the crazy answer is do the flip side of trying to get them to say yes. And instead of looking at no as an obstacle, no as a means. And the first person that ever did this that I was coaching, a political fundraiser, and instead of saying, would you like to take the White House back in November, said, have you given up on taking the White House back in November? And so instead of looking at no as the enemy, understanding what happens to somebody when they say no. So when I say no, I protect myself. I automatically become more relaxed, and I'm more interested in learning. Plus, it also triggers something else that's very powerful, is the sense of laws. And there's some psychologists that believe that literally every single decision we make is based on a fear of laws. I'm not sure if it's every decision, but it's really high on the hit parade. And so if you can trigger a fear of loss, I mean, you snap somebody's attention right away. We send out a lot of emails on a regular basis to people who have stopped. responding to us. One-line emails. If you've given up on this project, I tell people when you send that email, be ready for an answer in 3 to 5 minutes. And nearly 1,000% of the time, that's what happens. The person, as soon as they see it, immediately responds. And the guy who is, I was explaining it to the guy who's my book agent, and in the midst of explaining it to him, he says, "Oh my God, somebody just did this to me the other day." He said, "I had an immediate reaction, and it was visceral, and I had to reach out to him right away." And he said, "I didn't even realize it happened at the time until you explained it to me." The two important points about that is, number one, you get an immediate reaction. And number two, they have no idea that you triggered it. So while it is an immediate and visceral reaction on their part, they don't necessarily connect it to you, but they connect it to the environment, and they actually see you as somebody they're kind of rescuing. So when they reach out to you, having been hit with this electric jolt, they're in a very positive frame of mind to you, and very open to talking. It's ridiculously powerful.
I've got a big grin on my face, Chris, because I'm literally going to send that email to our email list when this show goes live. Probably cut this bit of the show and make it into a separate video, because I think that's super actionable and useful, and it has the depth of the psychology behind it as well. So everyone, there's going to be so many people listening to the show now who will get the email, open it, and it'll probably be something along the lines of, "Have you given up on the Salesman Podcast?" or something like that. And then they'll realise that I'm talking about this show that they just listened to, and they'll be face palming that they've just been influenced that way. And moving on from that, then, so you've got you've got a series of these perhaps in place. What is the next step to go deeper? And if it isn't finding the religion, perhaps we can come on to that. You really piqued my interest with that. I feel like there's a lot to go at with that particular topic in general.
If you're looking for a CRM, get Monday.com's flexible CRM solution that can manage the entire customer lifecycle, client projects, and...
That's a perfect question, because once you've created this cattle prod of a response, the question is where to from there. And the answer to is that's when you really want to drive for the "that's right" response from the other person. Because that triggers, again, it triggers multiple things psychologically that work in your favor. And I've got a friend of mine, a client that we're coaching now, who's with one of the large mega internet providers. And he says, and more often than not, when I employ this, people talk themselves into the deal that I wanted all along. And triggering "that's right," we say "that's right" when you've reached an epiphany moment. I mean, and you never say, when you completely pronounce something as the complete and utter truth, you never say "you're right." You say "that's right." And that's actually where you want to go right after you trigger the no. In many cases, if you need to trigger the no to get a non-responder going again, they've got some dilemma in their life that they're struggling with. They're trying to obtain an epiphany, some sort of clarity anyway. And when you clear their mind enough so that they're open to an epiphany or clarity, you want the "that's right" response. And at that moment, here's the range of deals that have been triggered that were almost immediately made on the spot. Terrorist case, $10 million ransom demand. We took them from $10 million to zero in one conversation. When we got a terrorist, sociopathic killer, to say "that's right" to something that we just put in front of them.
And what's I don't know if you can dive into that at all, but what would be the wording, the questions, and I paint a bit more of a picture around that, because that sounds fascinating.
Here's the hard part. Articulating their point of view, stating it in a way that almost sounds like it's against your interests. And that's the big barrier for everyone triggering the "that's right" moment. Because what I coach my negotiator, what I really am is an international deal-making coach. I coach far more negotiations than I ever.
Face palming that they've just been influenced that way. And moving on from that, then, so you've got a series of these perhaps in place. What is the next step to go deeper? And if it isn't finding the religion, perhaps we can come on to that. You really piqued my interest with that. I feel like there's a lot to go at with that particular topic in general.
That's a perfect question, because once you've created this cattle prod of a response, the question is where to from there. And the answer to is that's when you really want to drive for the "that's right" response from the other person. Because that triggers, again, it triggers multiple things psychologically that work in your favor. And I've got a friend of mine, a client that we're coaching now, who's with one of the large mega internet providers. And he says, and more often than not, when I employ this, people talk themselves into the deal that I wanted all along. And triggering "that's right," we say "that's right" when you've reached an epiphany moment. I mean, and you never say, when you completely pronounce something as the complete and utter truth, you never say "you're right." You say "that's right." And that's actually where you want to go right after you trigger the no. In many cases, if you need to trigger the no to get a non-responder going again, they've got some dilemma in their life that they're struggling with. They're trying to obtain an epiphany, some sort of clarity anyway. And when you clear their mind enough so that they're open to an epiphany or clarity, you want the "that's right" response. And at that moment, here's the range of deals that have been triggered that were almost immediately made on the spot. Terrorist case, $10 million ransom demand. We took them from $10 million to zero in one conversation. When we got a terrorist, sociopathic killer, to say "that's right" to something that we just put in front of them.
And what's I don't know if you can dive into that at all, but what would be the wording, the questions, and I paint a bit more of a picture around that, because that sounds fascinating.
Here's the hard part. Articulating their point of view, stating it in a way that almost sounds like it's against your interests. And that's the big barrier for everyone triggering the "that's right" moment. Because what I coach my negotiator, what I really am is an international deal-making coach. I coach far more. ransom demand. We took him from $10 million to zero in one conversation. When we got a terrorist, a sociopath, the killer, to say that's right to something that we just put in front of him.
And what sort of, I don't know if you can dive into that at all, but what would be the wording, the questions, and what paint a bit more of a picture around that, because that sounds fascinating.
Here's the hard part. Articulating their point of view, stating it in a way that almost sounds like it's against you. Interest. And that's the big barrier for everyone triggering the that's right moment. Because what I coach my negotiator, what I really am is an international deal-making coach. I coach far more negotiations than I've ever been in. I flatter myself to think of myself as Phil Jackson. The NBA coach. Phil Jackson was a fairly good NBA player. He was one of the best coaches that ever lived because he studied it so hard and he had to struggle as a player to get better. It wasn't natural to him. He never started on any NBA team. He has more championship rings than anybody else. And I coach people. But getting back to your question, what are we trying to do? Articulate it from their point of view. With this particular terrorist, we said, you're not seeking ransom, you're looking for economic damages because the people of your region have been harmed. They've gone through 500 years of oppression from the Spanish to the Japanese to the Americans, which was all the nonsense that he was spewing. When we spewed his nonsense right back to him and then added back into him how he felt about it, which essentially completely took all of his punch, all the power out of his punches. It's amazing what you do to someone, with someone, when you beat them to the punch on what they want to say. It just kind of takes the wind out of their sails. And then they feel connected to you, and they want to cooperate with you. If we could do it with a sociopath, then you could do it with anybody, and we did. And so we articulated it completely from his point of view, and he literally said on the phone to the negotiator that I was coaching, he said, that's right. And we went from $10 million to zero in one conversation. Take the same thing, pharmaceutical sales person. She's trying to sell a doctor who's in her territory, who's just not buying the latest drug, the hottest drug that they have from her corporation. And she realizes that she's got to articulate from his point of view. She makes an appointment with him. She sits down. And again, she basically, what most people would say, is almost badmouths her position. She said, you're not just going to buy some drug from me because it's a high-profit drug. Your patients are important to you. You see them more as just patients, but they're people, and you're responsible for their lives. And you're not just going to take my latest product from me because I'm trying to sell it. Almost as if she's trying to talk him out of the deal, flirting with that one. She said he turned and looked at her as if it was the first time he'd ever seen her. And he said, that's right. And the barriers came down and she made the sale.
So how do you go then from because I appreciate that from the standpoint of building rapport, building trust, building massive trust in an instant. How do you go then from undermining your message and perhaps why you're there in the first place somewhat, to then getting them to change their mind and accepting, to use the pharmaceutical sales example, for them to go, hey, okay, you're on my wavelength, you understand where I'm coming from. How do you stop them just going, okay, fine, and shut the door in your face, and versus going, hey, okay, maybe I need to rethink this, and I will end up buying it, if that makes sense? Right,
well, that's what we're horrified by. That they'll say that's right and then slam the door in our face. And the scary thing about this is that never happens. I think I've literally coached thousands of people with this method, and not one time has anyone gotten a negative response to that's right. Not one single time has the door been slammed or the conversation even taken a turn for the worse.
Why not? Because it seems logical that you, in that situation again, the doctor goes, yes, that's right. Okay, why are you still here? Okay, I'm busy. Let me get on with what I'm doing. Even though I appreciate that perhaps they are, they've built that rapport, they've built that trust, and he might, be thinking in his head, oh, next time she comes in, I'll speak to her because she'll be straight with me. But what I'm not getting is I'm getting that it works in reality. What I don't understand is the psychology behind why, because it seems counterintuitive, like the behavioral psychology about why it actually makes that difference.
Starting out with any new project management software usually feels something like this. Where do you even start? Well, you've probably got some to-dos written down somewhere, right? Let's try.
Well, one of the reasons is, and some of this has been actually shown scientifically, is that when we identify negatives or when we identify barriers, we simply identify it. I don't know who thought this up, but there was actually a scientific experiment that was conducted where wires were connected to the amygdala, which is where all of our thoughts in our brain roll through the amygdala. Some people refer to it as reptile brain, some people refer to it as a caveman brain. It literally colors, puts a spin on every single thought that we have. And now with magnetic resonance imaging being used on our brains, we can track electrical activity in brains, and now they've isolated where the negative activity in the amygdala is and where the positive activity in the amygdala. And in this portion of the brain, there's actually about 4 times as much real estate, if you will, dedicated processing negative thoughts as opposed to positive thoughts. And that's why negative thoughts are almost 4 times the barriers that you deal. And while what appreciation does is it quiets this part of the brain. And they've shown in these experiments that when barriers are simply identified, the electrical activity in the negative part of the brain drops dramatically, which means the negative thoughts that are getting in the way, the barriers to our deals, almost disappear, sort of leaving the positive side functioning and giving it the ability to where the positive activity in the amygdala. And in this portion of the brain, there's actually about
when she comes in, I'll speak to her because she'll be straight with me. But what I'm not getting is I'm getting that it works in reality. What I don't understand is the psychology behind why because it seems counterintuitive. Like the behavioral psychology about why it actually makes that difference.
Well, one of the reasons is, and some of this has been actually shown scientifically, is that when we identify negatives or when we identify barriers, we simply identify it. I don't know who thought this up, but there was actually a scientific experiment that was conducted where wires were connected to the amygdala, which is where all of our thoughts in our brain roll through the amygdala. Some people refer to it as reptile brain, some people refer to it as a caveman brain. It literally colors, puts a spin on every single thought that we have. And now with magnetic resonance imaging being used on brains, we can track electrical activity in brains, and now they've isolated where the negative activity in the amygdala is and where the positive activity in the amygdala. And in this portion of the brain, there's actually about 4 times as much real estate, if you will, dedicated processing negative thoughts as opposed to positive thoughts. And that's why negative thoughts are almost 4 times a bit. That you deal. And while what appreciation does is it quiets this part of the brain. And they've shown in these experiments that when barriers are simply identified, the electrical activity in the negative part of the brain drops dramatically, which means the negative thoughts that are getting in the way, the barriers to our deals, almost disappear. And they've shown in these experiments that when barriers are simply identified, the electrical activity in the negative part of the brain drops dramatically, which means the negative thoughts that are getting in the way, the barriers to our deals almost disappear, sort of leaving the positive side function and giving it the ability to take over. One of our philosophies is that if you can eliminate the barriers, there's a pretty good chance the positives will take over and make your deal for you. As one of my clients says, more often than not, which is actually Las Vegas odds. If more often than not, you bet on 7, then you go to 7, you bet on 7, you walk away with 8 very quickly. More often than not, the positive takes over and makes the deal for you. Or worst case scenario, and it's the flip side of never be mean to someone who can hurt you by doing nothing. Literally everybody we interact with has the ability to hurt us by doing nothing. If you're willing to accept that, then the flip side is true. It can always help us by doing something positive, even if it's moving us towards the front of the line, the top of their inbox instead of the bottom of their inbox. Make somebody mad who's an order taker, and your order goes to the bottom of the inbox. So they always have the ability to hurt you. If they can always hurt you, they can always help you. And one more maxim to understand, never be so sure of what you want that you would take something better. Don't take tunnel vision into a deal. Focus on a goal means you have tunnel vision. So you have to be a little bit flexible. You have to be willing to the ridiculous to see what happens with it. That's right. Not knowing where it's going to go, but just take it from the deal maker and coach, the hostage negotiator. It's going to be good.
I love it. Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. It's cleared up for me. And it seems like you've almost got to take the potential. It may happen as one step back, but then the guard drops, the reptilian barriers that are up to protect you physically that shouldn't be necessarily involved in negotiation drop. So it allows you to take one step back, which brings you 50 steps forward, which is good. I understand that better now, so I appreciate that, Chris. You've teased us a little bit with it, but I think this is perhaps the most important thing about what we're going to talk about today, because this allows us to get to that question that shifts everything in our favour, and that is understanding the other person's viewpoint. Now, is this something that we should learn as a skill to be able to do in the moment when we meet that person? That there's a series of questions, or you've got your experience and your knowledge to be able to do it on the fly ad hoc, or should we be doing massive research before the fact to get as best a picture as what we possibly can about that individual and their viewpoints before we walk in the room?
Your first assignment is the last thing you have to worry about with Chegg. Get homework help customized to your courses, including writing tools like grammar and plagiarism check, easy citations, and expert feedback within 24 hours. Subscribe to Chegg and we'll help guide you from your first day to your final.
All right, some research. Some people want to do massive amounts of research and are horrified of getting caught off guard at the table. And they will spend 2 weeks trying to find out answers that they could have gotten in 10 minutes in a negotiation. So first of all, look at the negotiation process as part of your research. Do enough so that the other person feels like you took the time to find out about them, but the rest of it they're dying to tell you. They're not only dying to tell you, but they're dying to put their spin on it. So minimal amount of appreciation. I would say that there's a 7-to-1 rate of return. In the first 10 minutes to hour of prep, 10 minutes to hour of research. Once you start going past an hour of preparation, you're probably wasting your time. You're probably doing very inefficient. So showing enough appreciation that you're taking the time to look at them initially, doing what's called get good at cold reads. And a lot of it doesn't take a genius to figure out. It's just that we're afraid to say. And as soon as you start talking about it from the other person's perspective, they're going to want to say that's right, and then they're going to want to add to it. They're going to want to give you even more information. Like if you're a salesperson, it doesn't take a genius to say to somebody on the other side, I bet you're tired of salespeople who talk you into things that you really don't want. The person on the other side is going to say to themselves, this is an interesting guy. And that's the kind of phrase, because at that moment, they're completely focused on you. The noise in their head has gone away. They're a lot less worried, and they're really kind of interested in hearing what you have to say next, which is the moment you're trying to create. At that point in time, they're at least listening. That's where you're trying to go.
And how deep do we have to go with these questions? Because that question of, basically salespeople wasting your time, you could go one step deeper of, I know you're a very busy person because of X, Y, Z, or you go deeper that you are clearly very busy in your job, so this is affecting your personal life, and so my service helps you, spend more time with your family, and you can go deeper and deeper and deeper with the questions. How do you know how deep you have to go, and is it always better to go as deep as you possibly can with this, or is there a sweet point?
You experiment a little bit with it by being willing to go silent. Some people are horrified of going silent in a conversation because they feel that they've lost control. Well, the secret to gaining the upper hand in negotiation is giving the other side the illusion of control. And much of that is taking a moment. It's an actual skill. It's called an effective pause, and it's called an effective pause because it's effective. So you'll stop occasionally, and you'll let them respond, and let them fill in the silence. And typically, silence in most cases in context means people want to hear more. If you go silent, you're signaling to the person you want to listen, which people love. If they go silent, that means they're guarded, but they want to hear more. And so their silence can be a trigger for you to talk some more. So if you go in tentatively, waiting for the moment when they start talking themselves into a deal, they can't talk themselves into the deal if you're talking. And no deal sticks like one that they've talked themselves into. You talk them into a deal, and you get what happened with my student and his client. They stop talking to you. Not only that, but they'll only communicate to you through others. When they talk themselves into deals, then here's the flip side.
You could says people wasting your time. You could go one step deeper. Of I know you're a very busy person because of X, Y, Z, or you go deeper that you are clearly very busy in your job, so this is affecting your personal life, and so my service helps you, spend more time with your family, and you can go deeper and deeper and deeper with the questions. How do you know how deep you have to go, and is it always better to go as deep as you possibly can with this, or is there a sweet point?
You experiment a little bit with it by being willing to go silent. Some people are horrified of going silent in a conversation because they feel that they've lost control. Well, the secret to gaining the upper hand in negotiation is giving the other side the illusion of control. And much of that is taking a moment. It's an act. Skill is called an effective pause, and it's called an effective pause because it's effective. So you'll stop occasionally, and you'll let them respond, and let them fill in the silence. And typically, silence. In most cases, in context, means people want to hear more. If you go silent, you're signaling to the person you want to listen, which people love. If they go silent, that means they're guarded, but they want to hear more. And so their silence can be a trigger for you to talk some more. So if you go in tentatively, waiting for the moment when they start talking themselves into a deal, I mean, they can't talk themselves into the deal if you're talking. And no deal sticks like one that they've talked themselves into. You talk them into a deal, and you get what happened with my student and his client. They stop talking to you. Not only that, but they'll only communicate to you through others. When they talk themselves into deals, then here's the flip side. They talk to you all the time. You have to manage that, which is a great problem to have.
Brilliant. And I want to wrap up this part of the show, Chris, with perhaps the end of this process somewhat, in that how do you know when you're ready to walk away from the negotiation, you think it's all wrapped up, when you think you have got anyone to do anything, how do you know whether that's actually stuck, whether they are just full out lying to get you out of their office so that they can follow up with their assistant and tell you in a polite email to sod off and don't come back? And how do you know, because there's varied degrees of that, of when they're just lying to your face, when they are perhaps semi-warm, lukewarm to the idea, and then at the far end is perhaps when they think they're engaged, they think they're on board, and then a few hours later they realise that it isn't for them. How do you judge that? And the follow-up question to that will be, how do you then, or what do you do with that information?
I love Acrobat because of the convenience. I can work from anywhere. It's really great to use Adobe Acrobat to be able to get real-time feedback and comments from my...
Well, great question, man. There's two things to do. Yes is nothing without how. So if you think they're agreeing just to get you out of the office and they're not going to implement, first of all, your instincts are probably pretty good. This mystical thing called intuition is recognition. And so if your gut instinct is something here is they're just giving me yes to get me out of the office, then pivot to your hows. Yes is nothing without how. How are we going to implement this? How's this going to happen? And double down on the hows a couple of times. But when they go dead silent on the hows, it tells you one of two things. Either they were lying to you, or they just hadn't thought it through. And lying is so common because as a defensive reaction, because people don't know where to go. They're kind of being trapped with yes. So you got to pivot to how anyway. And they may not have thought it through. There's no difference between someone who has no idea how to get something done and someone who's overtly lying to you. And in either case, it's not going to happen, and you have to solve the how anyway. The sooner you pivot to how, the sooner you know whether or not you've got a deal. The second part is if you think that you've done everything you can and there's no deal to be had, and I had so many people I coached and pulled no deal into a real deal out of the fire by simply finishing this, because it's most important how you finish a conversation. People don't remember conversations how they happen. They remember for the most intense moment and how they ended. Broadway in the United States has known this forever when they say, give them a good finish and they'll forgive you for anything. So you always want to make sure you come. And I had so many people I coached and pulled no deal into a real deal out of the fire by simply finishing this, because it's most important how you finish a conversation. People don't remember conversations how they happen. They remember for the most intense moment and how they ended. Broadway in the United States has known this forever when they say, give them a good finish and they'll forgive you for anything. So you always want to make sure your conversations end on a positive note. And a great type of conversation is, I appreciate your time. It seems like there's nothing I can say to make this work out. What your intention is to show them respect, and you want to end it on a positive note and show them that you can have no deal and walk away. No deal into a real deal out of the fire by simply finishing this, because it's most important how you finish a conversation. People don't remember conversations how they happen. They remember for the most intense moment and how they ended. Broadway in the United States has known this forever when they say, give them a good finish and they'll forgive you for anything. So you always want to make sure your conversations end on a positive note. And a great way to tie up a conversation is I appreciate your time. It seems like there's nothing I can say to make this work out. What your intention is to show them respect, and you want to end on a positive note, and show them that you can have no deal and walk away. And more often than not, a very high percentage of the time, the other person has responded in the moment and said, you know what, here's what it would take.
So you ask that question and then you leave a pause, is that correct?
Exactly right. Seems like there's nothing I can do to make this work. A pause is 3 seconds, which when you get used to it is a very quick time. When you're not used to making pauses, it seems like an eternity.
Yeah.
But 3 seconds is all you have to wait. And look at them, and at that point, and either they're coming back with what they need to make the deal, or they're shaking your hand and you're asking, they're thanking you for the time.
Fantastic. I feel like we've gone through this very quickly, but this is almost a one-on-one of negotiation, so I really appreciate that, Chris. I feel like we've gone from start to finish here, and I'll write this up in the show notes as well for everyone listening, and we'll talk about your book in a minute, which is clearly the best resource if anyone wants to dive into this further. But I've got a few questions that I ask everyone who comes on the show. Chris, these are quick-fire questions, but if you feel like it needs a longer answer, feel free to dive a bit deeper into it. First one, which do you prefer, rock or pop music?
But I'm a little bit of a classic rock guy. I'm willing to admit that.
Nice. What's, if possible, dollar size, what's the biggest deal you've ever closed?
All right, I've coached someone to $1 billion deal. I've personally closed $1 million deals, but I've coached much bigger deals than I've ever been involved in. And our current client now has closed $100 million deals with the same skills that we use between a husband and a wife over a Christmas tree.
Love it. Okay, next one. What is one book or resource other than your own that you recommend to the Sales and Podcast audience?
Starting out with any new project management software usually feels something like this. Where do you even start? Well, you've probably got some to-dos written down somewhere, right? Let's drop the...
a colleague...
You've ever closed?
All right, I've coached someone to $1 billion deal. I've personally closed $1 million deals, but I've coached much bigger deals than I've ever been involved in. And our current client now has closed $100 million deals with the same skills that we use between a husband and a wife over a Christmas tree.
Love it. Okay, next one. What is one book or resource other than your own that you recommend to the Sales and Podcast audience?
A colleague in town here, a guy named Christopher Kai, has got a book out there that I like called Big Game Hunting, which is about networking. And I like Chris's book a lot. He's a really innovative guy. He's also a student of Keith Ferrazzi. for Kai, has got a book out there that I like called Big Game Hunting, which is about networking. And I like Chris's book a lot. He's a really innovative guy. He's also a student of Keith Ferrazzi, who wrote the all-time classic Never Eat Alone, which is also a networking book, which happened to be co-written by my co-author, Paul Ross. Both of those books are really good. And I'll throw one more book out. Anything written by Adam Grant. Adam Grant's got Give and Take and Originals out there, those two books. Adam Grant's a brilliant guy. I like his stuff.
Nice. We'll link to all them in the show notes over at salesman.red. Chris, what does
this book a lot? He's a really innovative guy. He's also a student of Keith Ferrazzi, who wrote the all-time classic Never Eat Alone, which is also a networking book, which happened to be co-written by my co-author, Paul Ross. Both of those books are really good. And I'll throw one more book out. Anything written by Adam Grant. Adam Grant's got Give and Take and Originals out there, those two books. Adam Grant's a brilliant guy. I like his stuff.
Nice. We'll link to all them in the show notes over at salesman.red. Chris, what does the first 60 minutes of your morning look like?
I'm chewing myself up mentally. A couple of different meditations, very short, sweet things. I know that appreciation puts me in a positive frame of mind, which then means I'm smarter. I'm very mercenary about my appreciation. So, I'll get out of bed and I want to cue myself up into an appreciative mindset so that I will enjoy the day. I write down things that I'm grateful for to start the day. So then spiritually it's good for me, and intellectually I'm smarter the more positive my frame of mind is, the more I enjoy the day as opposed to being inflicted with.
Love it. I'm glad you brought up gratitude. It's something that comes up.
Good mindset so that I will enjoy the day. I write down things that I'm grateful for to start the day. So then spiritually it's good for me, and intellectually I'm smarter the more positive my frame of mind is, the more I enjoy the day as opposed to being inflicted with.
Love it. I'm glad you brought up gratitude. It's something that comes up with the highly successful people that come on the show like yourself. It's something that when I first started mentioning it on the show, I got responses from the audience about it's a bit woo-woo and like hippie-ish to be writing down things that you're grateful for every morning. But it's something I do, and there is studies and the psychology behind it, but it's enough for me that I feel that when I write down the 5 things that I'm grateful for, it usually starts off being the obvious ones like I've got a roof over my head. By the time I get to the 5th or 6th, it's something that I probably never really thought about before, and so it does make me ponder for that second, and that's enough to get me out of the you wake up and you just want to get on with the work and you want to get home kind of mindset. It allows you to be more in the moment, and it carries for me for at least a lunchtime, and then it goes out the window. Maybe I need to do it again at lunch. But Chris, I've got one final question for you, and since you've been on the show before, you've answered this, so I'm going to twist it around slightly. If you could sit down with every single person who's listening to the show now, mainly B2B millennial salespeople, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them that goes across all industries, that goes across all job types? What's the one piece of advice you'd give them to help them become better at selling?
By and large, if you just step back a little bit, not a lot, if you just step back and start taking the attitude, let's make time work for me a little more. Let's engage in a great process and let the deals come to me. As soon as I try to put in the mindset of, let this come to me, I will encourage it. That doesn't mean let it come to me passively. Still continue to encourage it. I make a lot more deals if I go from encouraging it to come to me and letting it come to me than if I go after it. This is not a passive approach. It's probably just dialing it down just a little bit. And it uses delays to save time, and you'll be pleasantly surprised at how much more you get done.
Nice. I love it. Chris, with that, I want you to tell us 2 things. I want you to tell us a little bit about your book, and I want you to tell us a little bit about your newsletter as well, because I feel that's going to be really useful for anyone that is perhaps enjoyed the show, wants to learn a bit more, and then, obviously, then eventually they'll buy your book, I'm sure. This might be a nice leeway towards that.
All right. Well, the book is an easy read. And that's why I got the co-author that I got, Paul Ross, because I knew he would design the book so you could take in the information very, very quickly. The crazy thing, the reviews on Amazon.com, Paul sent me an email the other day saying, literally at least 1 in every 3 reviews says the book is life-changing. And all the others that are positive, and every now and then somebody throws in a negative, are about how easy it was to absorb the information, how quickly you could pick it up. A lot of people start talking about cutting deals when they're a third of the way through the book. One executive sent me an email saying that he bought the book, read it on a plane on the way to a deal, did a couple things that he read on a plane, and got the deal 2 weeks early. All of this says that the book's easy to absorb. If you're open to trying counterintuitive ideas, you will download this information really quickly. Another colleague/client has read the book 3 times already, which again tells you, and he's not Einstein. He's not reading the dictionary to learn an English language. It tells you that the book is absorbable and you can pull it in quickly. And consistently, people are making great deals with it. And, they're not bragging about how they killed anybody, because when you kill somebody in a deal, what you've done is left somebody resentful behind you, and that's bad for business. So there isn't anybody said, I slaughtered this guy and he'll never be the same. That's bad for your reputation long term. So this is also about making great deals and having people want to continue to deal with you.
And just share with us where we can sign up for your newsletter as well, because there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, the newsletter comes out twice a month, and we're always adding depth and specifics to what I talk about in the book. And so, the website is blackswanltd.com, and we've got a tab on the menu bar at the top on the right, a link to the blog. It pulls you into the blog. You can see all the things that we've written recently in the past, and you sign up, and you get first crack at the information, which comes out twice a month. And a lot of people are really enjoying reading that. It adds to that depth of knowledge. It also helps sort of cue them up that day for how they want to negotiate. The pieces that we write are short. Nothing is more than 1,000 words, so everybody's busy. We want to help you get an edge each and every day that you go out into the jungle.
Good stuff. Well, we'll link to all that in the show notes or at salesman.red. And with that, Chris, I want to thank you for your time again. I want to thank you for your insights. You used the word counterintuitive then, and a lot of them are, which makes them special, seemingly special to you. And so I appreciate all the work you've done in this field. I appreciate you being able to come on the show and put it across so succinctly. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
And there we have it. Thank you, Chris, for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Thank you, Sales Nation, for listening as you're driving around to your sales meetings, and of course watching this on YouTube as well. I'm waving to everyone who's watching this on YouTube right now. And if you haven't already, it's well worth checking out Conor Burt's episode yesterday, where we dive into not the tips, tactics, and techniques of sales, but how to more effectively learn them so you can compound your sales growth by investing into that episode. That's available at salesman.red/185. And with that all said, I'll speak to you all again tomorrow.
I love Acrobat because of the convenience. I can work from anywhere. It's really great to use Adobe Acrobat to be able to get real-time feedback and comments from my creative agency when I'm on the go. Everything is in the one place and it's super professional.
Create, manage, and grow your business with Wix.com. Your website is the core of your business. That's why you need a fully maintained platform where security and performance are taken care of for you, so you can focus on growing and scaling your business. Monetize your content. Create new revenue streams. And generate more sales. Drive traffic and promote your brand with advanced marketing tools. Launch Facebook and Instagram ads to reach the right people. And send email marketing campaigns right from your site's dashboard. Where marketing, CRM solutions, and sales.
You go on today's episode of the Salesman Podcast.
As a hostage negotiator, we use human nature-based
Focus. The zone, aka flow. A state you're in when nothing in the world matters. You're so focused on what you're doing that everything else falls away. Wind blowing through my hair, arms pumping at my sides, and feet hitting the pavement. I noticed when I got into the zone, I was happy, excited, productive, and content. I'm not the only one. Athletes, artists, musicians have talked about this feeling of flow. We've all felt it. World-renowned psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi discovered and coined the term flow, and has dedicated his life to doing research on flow and how it leads to a happier, more fulfilled life. I had the honor of speaking with the man himself.
Can you just give a quick summary of what flow is?
It's the feeling that we get when we get completely immersed in what you're doing. So you're focusing all your attention on something that you want to experience. And it's what makes life kind of really interesting and worth living.
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who's sort of the godfather of flow psychology.
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Now this author's name is Mihai. His book is called Flow. You can also watch his TED Talk.
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is kinda a big deal. And in our search for flow, my team and I reached out to the founding father himself. We scheduled a Skype interview, but experienced some technical difficulties. So we set out to meet the professor, psychologist, and author at his office at Claremont Graduate University.
Last year when I was asked to Budapest to talk with the Prime Minister and plan how to change the educational system in Hungary, the Prime Minister and Viktor Orban. This is the president of the country. It's not just human beings who feel it. I noticed we had a hunting dog, and when we were in Chicago in the city, he was always kind of bored. But you took him out in the forest and he became a different animal because all of his genetic equipment was focused on the smell and the lights of the foliage in the trees. Living beings like to live. They like to be involved in what happens in the world with their body, with their mind, with their attention. So this is what I gave the name flow to.
Besides neuroanatomical changes in flow, there are neurochemical changes, right? The brain produces a giant cascade of neurochemistry. You get norepinephrine, dopamine, anandamide, serotonin, and endorphins. All 5 of these are performance-enhancing neurochemicals.
The neurochemicals released during the flow state make us feel like our senses are heightened, just like the hunting dog in the forest. Norepinephrine and dopamine enable the brain to take in more information, process it more deeply and quickly. Ever notice that when you're in flow, you can suddenly link ideas together and see patterns you couldn't before?
Lomachenko with the right hand. Koasica is being dominated here. He was losing to Lee Selby as well.
These chemicals lower signal-to-noise ratio, so you detect more patterns. At the same time, the neurochemical anandamide promotes lateral thinking. Lateral thinking is a linking of very incompatible ideas together, so you're making all kinds of connections.
I think it was in one of your books. A good way to sum up flow is you stay in the present, but you also focus on your long-term goals as well.
You can be in flow without thinking about long-term goals, but the ideal is to find flow in things that will grow and that will make you a better musician or a better athlete or a better whatever you find flow in. You can't stay at the same level without getting bored after a while. You have to have higher challenge, higher challenge, higher challenge. But to have a higher challenge and be in flow, you have to have higher skills. Really, flow is the mechanism for growth. It's amazing when we started studying people who have normal, regular jobs, we find that among the people who do that kind of job, some are in flow most of the time because they are able to focus on the goal and what they want to do. And it may be, an assembly line worker who has to do one movement every 48 seconds. Some of those people are able to have a higher goal, a more complex challenge. Now they do it a little faster or a little more precisely.
In order to get to the flow state, there must be a balance between the challenge of the task and the skill of the performer. If the challenge is too low and you have low skills, you feel apathetic. If the challenge is low and you have mediocre skills, you feel boredom. But
find that among the people are able to.
If the challenge is too low and you have low skills, you feel apathetic. If the challenge is low and you have mediocre skills, you feel boredom. But if the task is too challenging and you have low skills, you arouse feelings of anxiety. It's about finding the sweet spot.
Flow shows up best when the challenge of the task at hand slightly exceeds your skill sets.
The challenge must be adjusted in order to keep you in flow.
The concept of flow is an autotelic concept.
Even though often you do it in an exotelic context. For instance, a surgeon A surgeon gets paid because he saves the life of a patient. But a good surgeon does surgery because he enjoys helping a person or making a person whole again. And so you do an exotelic job because you get paid from the external world, you're recognized. But a good surgeon really does it for autotelic reasons. Unfortunately, most people do their job only because of the exotelic, the external reward.
Do you think that flow can ever be a negative thing?
People find these experiences really addictive, and they orient their lives around having these experiences.
There are people who get flow from hurting other people or from stealing. One of my students did an interesting study of flow among thieves. Unless you begin to experience flow with your children, with your spouse, that can become your whole life.
In your book, Creativity, Flow, and the Psychology of Discovery and Invention, you say it is easier to enhance creativity changing conditions in the environment than by trying to make people think more creatively.
One of the ways that people show creativity is by changing their environment, their job, their family environment, whatever. Changing them so that it produces more flow.
It is weird how certain songs will trigger like some sort of inspirational creativity inside of you.
In a series of lab and semi-field experiments conducted by Juliet Zhu, it was found that environmental factors like lighting, ceiling height, music, background color, and number of people surrounding you affects a person's creativity. They found that creativity reaches peak levels when background noise is at about 70 to 80 decibel points. Too much or even too little noise are not ideal. Lighting. In a dimly lit room, people were found to be more creative and were able to make more lateral, meaning unrelated and complex connections.
What do you think the future looks like for us with the advancement of technology? How quickly we're moving?
We'll have difficulties, but I think that we are equipped to learn to move with this. I got letters from generals in the Air Force who read my book and said, is this really applicable? Our problem is that we are training people in the Air Force to go into space. They will be alone in the space shuttle for weeks and weeks. And we are afraid that they will go out of their mind or something, or the Navy have similar.
Sample, and you wait for years, and if this is longevity experiment, you need to wait until all of them die. So your feedback loop is 15 to 20 years. While right now it's almost every 5 minutes I just can take feedback from my glucose monitor. Some executives say that we live in a different world. Andrew, what is the best use of our time? I have so many questions there. I know it's about the book, but also, you know so many important things.
Yeah, so again, because a lot of people are logging on now, Sergey and I have met once. He's got this amazing book out today. What's going on here? It's
it's fine now. Yeah.
He has this amazing book. He has this amazing book out, and I just want to reiterate that I'm not, we're not business partners. We don't have anything like that. It's just, when I see something I love, I just can't stop blabbing about it. I just sort of joke that I have a kind of scientific Tourette's. If I see something that I'm really excited about, I just have to tell people. So, so I'm very excited about the book. I think it'd be great. Maybe we just talk for, I think people might appreciate maybe 10 minutes or so if we just talk about things that you do and that I do, because there's some overlap, but there's also some non-overlap there. In terms of really what it means to have a good finger on the pulse of one's current and future health. And because I think now we all hear different things. Eat mostly plants, eat all meat, eat fast all day, fast 3 days. But I think we do things a little differently, and that sometimes can be a fun way to think about.
Compare notes.
Yeah, and compare notes. So I'd love to know, you're a super healthy guy, you have a family, you're very successful, and you have a vast knowledge about this business of growing young and longevity and health. So what are the things that you do? I'm really curious. What do you do?
Thanks for this question, Andrew. And obviously, I have a lot of questions on my bucket called peace of mind, specifically to sleep, to how the brain works.
Yeah.
So
we'll talk about that too.
It's going to be two-way. Yeah. So when I have my 30 seconds on longevity, I push people to do their annual screening. I don't know if this is on your radar. We're arguing with my wife. I'm saying the date of your annual screening is the most important day of your year. She has some other idea what's the most important day, but for me it's the case. And and I saved so many lives. I'm not MD, I'm not a professor or academic, and I saved so many lives just pushing people to do the annual screening. And it's all the same story. Early stage cancer, they fully recovered. They call me back and say, Sergey, you saved my life. Well, this is actually what brought me into longevity, this whole realization that, you know, even without being medical professional, you know, I still can impact in a positive way humans' lives. And like, so I do medical checkup in Human Longevity Center in San Diego, and like every year is completely different. Last 2 years, my full body MRI and a lot of the other diagnostic devices that they use to read from my body, it, you know, has been pre-analyzed by artificial intelligence. So right now it's not human being, it's human being empowered by AI, and they have much better chances to get an understanding of what is wrong in my body, where is the emerging problem, so I can treat it in very proactive and very preventive way. So that's for me 1 out of 5 things.
What, can I just ask you for, because people have a range of different financial backgrounds. So, like so a blood test, obviously I'm a big fan of doing a blood test once a year, every 6 months. And they're varying costs, although there are things you can ask your doctor that will inspire them to give you blood tests on your insurance. But a lot of people don't have insurance. So what is the cost of getting, I've never had a whole body MRI. It's interesting. I've done MRI experimentally, but I've never actually had one on myself. So what is the cost of the kind of thing that you're talking about? And of course, keeping in mind that treating a disease is very costly.
Oh, yeah. So if you look at the I'll come back to you with a figure in a minute, but the economic value of preventive screening is incomparable to the cost of treatment your disease later on. It's at least 10 to 20 times less than responding to something in a late stage in emergency. So the cost is anywhere between $2,500 and $5,000. And
so not insignificant, but on the other hand, compared to treating a major disease, it's very small compared to treating like a major cancer or something.
It is like, so they, for example, they use Cologuard, the fecal test, and they soon going to be using liquid biopsy, like a blood test to understand your risks of the like early stage colon cancer. And so even like colonoscopy, what I learned in the US today is anywhere between $800 and $2,000 if you do that. So I do think it's a valuable package, and it's incomparable to like increasing quality and quantity of your life is much more valuable than whatever cost of the checkup you do. And I do think there's just a lot of opportunities to do it within your own health plan. Like half of the doctors will be delighted to have a discussion with you. Like if you're gonna be really preventive and you want to understand your risk at very early stage, that's for benefit for all of us.
做生意最危險係乜嘢？就係將 marketing 咁重要嘅位置交俾 agent 做，俾 agent 拉住個鼻走，俾個 agent 拖住後腳。你想走快啲，走得更加遠，係佢話事，唔係你話事。就好似我其中一個啱啱參加我嘅課程學員。
Focusing deeply on one task for hours in a row is one of the core skills for professional success. However, in a world where distractions are available at our fingertips, it becomes harder and harder to focus deeply for long periods. The lack of focus is truly an epidemic. Most people haven't even experienced the power of flow state, the most productive state we can be in, because of the continuous distractions and interruptions. With this video, however, you'll be equipped with the right tools and habits to protect your focus and reach flow state more often. Distractions are the #1 enemy of your focus and productivity. Thus, to protect your focus and reach flow state more frequently, you need to remove the main sources of distraction from your work environment. Specifically, there are 2 forms of distractions. 1. External distractions, smartphone, notifications, social media, news, email, and noise. 2. Internal distractions, thoughts, stress, and mind racing. When you remove these distractions from your environment, you'll be able to work with unbreakable focus and do meaningful deep work without getting distracted every few minutes. The first step to protecting your focus is to identify the biggest sources of external distractions that hijack your attention. The most common forms of external distractions are smartphones, social media, food, Netflix, email, video games, and instant messaging apps. Depending on what's easier, either remove these distractions from your environment or remove yourself from these sources. The harder it is to access distractions, the less likely you'll get distracted. If distractions are easily accessible, however, you will get distracted. That's because distractions, such as smartphones, social media, news websites, and Netflix, are designed to get you addicted. They're designed to stimulate your brain in unnatural ways to get you hooked. More specifically, your brain releases a lot of dopamine when engaged in these distractions, which is precisely why it's so hard to resist their temptation. The mind is always looking for the easiest way to get stimulated the most. It's looking for the path of least resistance. Things like Netflix, fast food, and smartphones are the perfect sources to provide this. Most of our daily tasks can't beat the instant gratification that these distractions provide, which is why we gravitate towards distractions when we're supposed to do our work. Most of our work offers stimulation, but not nearly as much as social media, YouTube, news, or fun conversations. Most of our work also offers gratification, but delayed gratification. The rewards of our work are almost always somewhere in the future, e.g., income, impact, and promotion, while the rewards of distractions are instant, e.g., entertainment, stimulation, fun. It's the battle of instant gratification versus delayed gratification. The best way to win this battle is by avoiding it as much as possible. Here are a few tips to do so. Put your smartphone on flight mode and place it in a different room or in your bag. Download a website blocker to stop yourself from checking news websites, social media, etc. Turn off the notifications from social media, email, and instant messaging. Don't work with email or instant messaging tabs open. Only have tabs open that are necessary for your task at hand. Work in a quiet space where you can't get distracted by noise or conversations. Put in noise-cancelling earbuds and put on repetitive type music. The key is to deprive yourself of all potential distractions so that your work is the most fun and stimulating thing left to do. When there are zero distractions, you create the space to enter flow state and do deep work. You can block all external distractions and remove them from your environment. But there's still one big source of distraction left, the mind. As humans, we are always thinking. Many times this serves us well, many times it doesn't. Thinking is a double-edged sword. It can lead to incredible breakthroughs, or it can distract you from your work and goals. To do the work, however, you need to learn how to calm your mind and limit the distracting inner chatter. There's an interesting principle in Buddhism that describes our mind as a monkey mind. Consider this analogy. Each thought is a branch, and your mind is a monkey, swinging from thought branch to thought branch all day long, without stopping. This sounds like it might be fun, but the result of an untrained monkey mind is primarily mental and physical fatigue. An untrained monkey mind distracts us from our work, talks us out of doing the things we should be doing, and seeks constant stimulation. All in all, to protect our focus and reach flow state, we need to tame the monkey mind. One of the most effective ways to tame the monkey mind is by practicing regular meditation. In my experience, meditation is one of the most powerful habits for productivity, and life in general. My mind is racing much more when I haven't been meditating for a few days. On the other hand, my mind is clear, calm, and focused when I've been meditating consistently. It enables me to work with deep focus. Meditation isn't woo-woo stuff. It's actually scientifically proven to improve your focus, decrease inner chatter, and improve your happiness. All in all, it's one of the most effective ways to tame the monkey mind, and to focus intensely on your work. Daily journaling is another habit I'd recommend to limit internal distractions. When you write down your thoughts onto paper, you capture them. This helps the monkey mind let go of distracting thoughts and focus on your work instead. Whether it's to-dos you still need to tackle, things you shouldn't forget, or stress you're dealing with, write it down. This frees up mental resources and protects your mental energy. Remember, your mind shouldn't be a storage place for thoughts and ideas. It should be a generator of high-quality thoughts and ideas. All in all, by taming the monkey mind, you automatically sharpen your focus as internal distractions are at a minimum. This allows you to engage in deep work and enter flow state more frequently. Now, do it. Knowing about how to protect your focus is not enough. You must put your knowledge into action. Therefore, as an action point for this video, apply at least 2 of these suggestions on how to limit external and internal distractions for your next work session.
Do you sometimes find the fear of what could happen is making nothing happen in your life? If so, I want you to come down here with me and I want to show you basically a very powerful methodology that allowed me to free myself from myself, because